Hello everyone, this is Divine Erdrick, and it's time for another wish list. So, a few quick things. I'm still working on getting the settings on this microphone to where I want them. It's definitely made cleaning up the sound easier, but again, please let me know if you have any sound preferences. Second, next Saturday, I'll be going to Vegas for a week to attend a trade show, so there won't be any upload on Wednesday, March the 20th. I swear, it often feels like Path of Exile launches always drop when my parents are at their busiest and need the extra help the most. Hopefully, the next expansion will drop when I'll have a little bit more time around launch to explore it. But for now, I'm not going to be able to get a video out that week. So hopefully, the next Geeking Out video will be ready for next week. I've almost got characters to where I want them, to record the footage that I want. Unfortunately, that video was recorded with my old microphone, and the sound cleanup didn't go as well, so the sound quality on that recording's probably not going to be as good as this one. So this was originally going to be my third and final wish list before the layoffs hit. It should still be the last one, but recently there was an alleged leak from Blizzard concerning Diablo, which makes this the perfect time for this list. Since the announcement of Diablo Immortal, Blizzard has stuck to the line that multiple Diablo projects are in the works. Then, just last week, games journalist Marcus Sellers tweeted that Blizzard has a total of 4 Diablo projects in the works. Diablo 4, a prequel game, and 2 spin-offs. Now, there doesn't appear to be any clarification if these games include or are in addition to Diablo Immortal. But assuming that he wasn't including the already announced game, this is a potentially really good thing. It could also be the worst news we've gotten in a while, as this might mean that Activision Blizzard could be running Diablo into the ground with this many projects. But let's play optimist for a bit. If there are 3 more Diablo games coming, besides Diablo 4, what would we want those games to be? So first off, I find the idea of a prequel very exciting. The lore around Diablo establishes a vast history for Sanctuary before the events of the first Diablo game. It could be fun to explore some of these early events much more closely. In particular, the 2 big events that I think most people will be interested in are the Sin Wars and the Mage Clan Wars. The great thing about either prequel is Blizzard can have a lot of fun with different mechanics and gameplay types we haven't seen in a Diablo game before. For example, a game set in the Sin War might be a story-based game where you're never quite sure whose side anyone is on or who might be pulling the strings behind anyone you interact with. A game set in the Mage Clan Wars might be heavily focused on magic. Since this was the time when many of the spells we sling in the Diablo games were first being developed, they could even play with a system similar to Diablo 3's Runes, where you get to create your own spells. Of course, the reference to a prequel could just be codename for a remaster that many of us still think is coming. But obviously the spin-off games are where there is the most potential for play, as these games wouldn't have to be tied to either the established narrative or any of the mainline Diablo mechanics. Now, back before BlizzCon, I released a video where I discussed what projects Blizzard could potentially announce besides Diablo 4. In that video, I dreamed of a Baldur's Gate Pillars of Eternity style game where you controlled a party instead of just one character. I would still love to see such a game. And the cool thing about that style of RPG is that it's easily portable to mobile platforms. So, bear with me here, that could potentially be a mobile game that could appeal to Western markets and not have to be some kind of Diablo-led experience or just a platform for microtransactions. Crazy, right? But just after BlizzCon, Kotaku's Jason Schreier wrote an article about the current history of Diablo 4's development. In it, he discussed a scrapped iteration of Diablo 4 under Josh Mosquera, codenamed Project Hades. Project Hades abandoned Diablo's isometric roots and instead created a Dark Souls-like experience. And all I have to say is yes, please? I can easily see why Activision Blizzard might be wary about releasing a game like that in the main Diablo franchise, as it would be an extreme and unexpected departure. But that would be a great idea for a spin-off. I would love to see Blizzard do a Souls-like, and exploring the Souls series to understand its appeal and mechanics might just be what the doctor ordered to help Blizzard understand how to properly do a dark fantasy game. And this would also be a shoo-in for a console game. They could build the game from the ground up to be playable on both consoles and PCs without having to make compromises for either system. Now, other than that, when we look through other types of genres we might try to make a Diablo spin-off in, we don't really see a lot that fits. Platformers, either 2D or 3D, don't seem like a good place to go for the series, even with the success of games like Zelda. The primary drive of Diablo has kind of always been that kill and loot idea. So having to get your loot by solving puzzles or crossing certain terrain, it's probably not going to be the most compelling thing for Diablo fans. Now, a third-person brawler game, perhaps in like the Platinum style, that has more potential, and it would build off of kind of the power fantasy of the Nephilim that Diablo 3 created. But that would, of course, also be more of a departure from the original feel of the Diablo series. Now, at first, a first-person game, not necessarily an FPS, but just first-person, might seem a little on the far-fetched side, but you could create a first-person or third-person over-the-shoulder action game around, say, for example, the Demon Hunter, or perhaps something in the style of like Heretic or Hexen for mage or sorcerer or wizard classes. But probably the coolest thing that you could do with a Diablo spin-off in first person would be to explore some of the darker, creepier, moodier places of Sanctuary, and do it somewhere around the lines of like Resident Evil 7. Now that could potentially create both a new place for Diablo to explore and for Blizzard to explore, but it also would potentially allow them to enter the VR market. Most other genres seem more meme fodder than serious ideas for entries. Certain types of strategy games might work, but the problem with strategy games is they tend to pull the player out of the action, and Diablo has classically always been about being stuck in. You could have a cinematic action experience similar to something like Uncharted, but that would potentially remove all of the role-playing elements from the game, and at its core, part of Diablo's appeal is it's a PC role-playing game. But let's talk about the three hot topics in games media currently: open world games, hero shooters, and battle royale. So Diablo Immortal will apparently already have some open world elements to it. And most MMOs are sort of like a pseudo open world to begin with. But I think most Diablo fans aren't particularly interested in what those open world forms will add to the game. But in my Diablo 4 wishlist, I discussed some ways that open world could potentially be to Diablo's benefit. But the fact is that more than likely, going open world was another Diablo game would develop even more tension with the fan base. So they'd have to almost sneak in any kind of open world mechanics. They'd essentially have to focus on new gameplay ideas that might have an open world bent to them, but avoid using that term open world. Because the simple fact is that open world games have become pretty tired. Too many companies are releasing too many open world games with too sparse content and too many excuses for microtransactions. So even if Blizzard could potentially come up with a new spin on the genre, it would take quite a bit of PR to convince fans to stay on board. Next, let's talk about a real hot button with many gamers right now. Battle Royale. Last April, Grinding Gear Games released a Battle Royale mode for Path of Exile, Path Royale, as an April Fool's Day joke. Now, since this was a joke, the game wasn't particularly well crafted or balanced, but it did show you could potentially do an isometric action RPG in the Battle Royale genre. But this would be just an invitation for revolt with all the bandwagoning currently around Battle Royale. I learned recently that apparently Tetris has a Battle Royale mode. Apparently it's also really good. But the simple fact of the matter is this is meme fodder. And again, it's another genre where fans and gamers are really weary of all the microtransactions. And it's a place where Blizzard would, well, be just kind of late to the party. But now let's talk about hero brawlers and shooters. Now, obviously, the pure interpretation of this wouldn't work, and Blizzard already has the most popular hero shooter, though Apex Legends might be competition there. But the idea of a multiplayer battle game built around heroes is applicable to Diablo. We already have plenty of Diablo characters, including even Deckard Cain, in Heroes of the Storm. Now, back during the development of Diablo 3, Blizzard had plans for PvP game modes. Many of those modes were even playable at BlizzCon in 2011. And initial reviews were pretty positive. But Blizzard scrapped PvP to focus on the single player. Eventually, we got dueling, but that was hardly the team PvP experience fans were looking for. A game focused solely around PvP might work though. Here, you wouldn't need to make any mechanics that would have to fit for both PvM and PvP. You could just focus on making a balanced PvP game mode. And you could make this mode just a quick, fun game for people to jump in on and enjoy a few games each day. Even better, they could release it at the same time they announced, or just before they released Diablo 4. This would help build hype for the game, and bring the community back in before the release. But ultimately, Activision Blizzard needs to learn from the mistakes they made with Diablo Immortal when it comes to these potential 3 projects. They need to realize that right now, their fans and gamers as a whole are watching their company and their games with nervous suspicion. They'd only just started convincing us that they could make a Diablo game with Reaper of Souls. But Diablo Immortal showed they were more interested in trends and the exploitation of their fandom's loyalty than making the best games in the industry. And there are so many potential pitfalls with these 3 projects. If they try to jump on trends like Battle Royale instead of setting the new industry standard, it could be the beginning of the end for the series. But the greatest concern here is that with potentially up to 5 Diablo projects currently in production, they need to show us they are not going to run this series into the ground, like they're currently doing with Call of Duty, or how Ubisoft almost destroyed the Assassin's Creed franchise. They need to demonstrate as thoroughly as they can that they are focused on Diablo 4 and making it the best game it can be. They need to show that the current Diablo 4 team is at least of the same caliber as any that worked on their main series releases, such as WoW, StarCraft 2, or Overwatch. These Diablo spin-offs need to be part of the growth and expansion that Activision Blizzard talked about in their investor conference call. And the fact that they are working on these 3 additional games while also laying off employees and taking other cost-cutting measures is concerning. But here's hoping the passionate developers at Blizzard are up to the challenge. This has been Divine Erdrick, and I'll see you all in Sanctuary.